Okay, sounds good. All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the CloudCast, your favorite circuit podcast, coming live from Clear Lake, Minnesota, and Fairhaven. This is Pastor Josh Reber with Pastor Dave Buchs. David, why are we doing this?
For one thing, I think we just have a fun time talking about the Bible, and the more time we spend talking about the Bible, the better. But also, you can never get too much. Like the listeners out there, whoever might happen to listen in, you can't get too much of time digesting what's going on in the Scriptures. So I think that's the main reason we're doing this, giving more material to the people out there.
That's good. And I don't want to flatter you too much, but I do enjoy talking to you, and whenever possible, publicly humiliating you. And if you're a listener to any of our other content, like our sermons, David will throw me under the bus from time to time. And so now you get to see how pastors interact on a regular basis, which I think is fruitful for the layperson. We're pretty normal guys, although Pastor Buchs is a normal guy to the nth degree, I will say.
Normal. You're stretching this language here. That is helpful. Yeah. If you think of your pastor as somehow too different from you, well, you're deceived. He's pretty much just like you. So, yeah, good. So we're going to talk about Genesis today. That's the plan. Genesis chapter 1. And I think that you have some helpful insights about things that are often pressing for people concerning historicity. When I read Genesis 1, I remember talking about this with somebody once in college. I sat down at lunch with a friend who was a coworker, and she was like, "Tell me about Christianity. Never heard anything about it before." And I said, "Well, let's start at the beginning." And I started reading Genesis, and I was like, I can hear how this sounds to her. This sounds like a fairy. This sounds mythological. It sounds like a fairy. 900 years old, right? He sprang these things up out of the ground, talking animals. Sounds like a fairy tale. Why is it not a fairy tale, Josh?
Well, okay, before I do that, this is the old bait and switch. David, you thought you were starting a Bible podcast with me, but now here's my attempt to change it into a philosophy podcast, and you're just going to have to bear with me because you agreed to do it. So before we get to the historicity of it, let's start in the primary place. So, this is how the Bible starts. In the beginning, God. Do you know where I'm going with this?
No. Fill me in. I'm lost.
Okay, good. So, God is the starting place for everything, right?
Okay, first article.
First article, in the beginning, God. And so this is a question I've been wrestling with. Like, what's the best starting place? So, obviously, with that person you were talking with, like, it just sounded ridiculous to you to start talking about Genesis or God. So what's the starting place for theology, for philosophy, for life? And you see different methods that different Christians have. And I've come to this realization, it doesn't really matter as long as it's true. So and I've got this from Peter Kreeft, an author you and I both admire, who's a philosopher. So he will say things like your metaphysics, as in what's running the world beyond the physical, right? So your metaphysics is going to determine your ethics and your epistemology, as in how you know something. It's going to inform every area of your life. So whether or not you start with the metaphysics or the epistemology, how you know it, if it's both true, you're going to end up in the same spot. So let's put this concretely. We're going to start with God. Okay, great. That's our metaphysics. God of the universe, triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We know it's true. Second question, though, is how do we know that? So that's the epistemological question. The Lutheran answer, of course, is what?
The Bible tells me so.
Yeah, that's right. The Bible tells me so. And you were taught that was some kind of fundamentalist nonsense. Let's do a favor for the fundamentalists. Okay, they weren't that bad, were they, David?
I might even be one, So
that's right. You can't spell fundamentalist without fundy. We could have this conversation at a different time. Fundamentally, what is a fundamentalist? And I don't think it's actually that they read the Bible at face value. Because if that's the case, then we're fundamentalists, which is fine. I'm fine with being labeled that. But that's right. So that's how we know anything. But so here's the thing: they go together. So what does the Bible tells us? It tells us about God. Okay. What does God tell us where to look for how to know about Him? The Scriptures, right? Jesus does this. So you see, there's this metaphysical, epistemological kind of cycle. It doesn't matter where you get into it. It doesn't matter where you start. As long as it's true, it's all going to come together. Am I making sense?
So you are, but help me out here. So you're talking specifically about the kind of knowledge of God that would be spiritual. Those who are born of the flesh, right, know the things of the flesh. But you're talking about this epistemological circle that you can only break into by means of the Spirit, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, that's how it works, right? So we know there's John 3, right? Nobody can be. You got to be born again of water and the Spirit, right? So it's got to be from God's own doing.
So then, how do you distinguish that? Let's say, how do I want to put it? That kind of metaphysic from the way that philosophers are doing metaphysics. So, for instance, I mean, Paul is going to tell us you do know things about God, right? You know things about God, and you could, to some extent, know God without having to break into that loop. You just know it by nature. It's baked in, so that you'd have to be a fool not to know that God exists. And which is, it seems to me, completely satisfying to most philosophers, or at least I mean, that they recognize the limits, the boundedness of their capacities, and they say, "Yep, these are the parameters we're working in. Any special revelation has got to be off the table because it's special revelation, right?" So, how do you distinguish these two things? How do you demonstrate that a different kind of metaphysic is needed?
Okay, I think I was with you until you got to the last question.
Okay, so how do you so you got Aristotle sitting next to you, and he says, "Yeah, I understand that there's a prime mover that's logically coherent. It makes perfect sense to me that there's a prime mover. Why do I need the Bible to tell me anything more about him? Why would the Bible be reliable in telling me something about him? I know so much without the Bible, and in fact, there are things that I know by my intuition and by my reason that are contradicted by the Bible. So why am I going to go with that?"
Okay, so now I'm talking to Aristotle. Okay, well, so now we're getting into apologetics. What kind of podcast did you want to start?
You started.
I thought you. I did. I thought you wanted to read the Bible. Okay, I mean, so Romans 1 is very helpful here. The distinction between natural knowledge and special revelation, right? That revelatory knowledge that we have from God Himself. So you can know a lot about the world by just observation, right? So the sciences are very helpful because they just help us observe the world. Okay, but again, who put those eyeballs in your head in the first place?
Okay.
Right? So, and maybe I'm sounding too much like a presuppositionalist Calvinist here, but I mean, we all know that's where you fall on the spectrum anyway, so that's fine. But this is helpful. It's like you can't be totally objective about anything because it's God who made you in the first place, right? So the very eyes that you see, God put those there in the first place. So it's always going to have that slant, and you could call it a bias if you want, but it's a very helpful bias.
Well, I mean, this is great because that explains then why in the beginning God is actually the only way you can begin the book. That's the only possibility.
Yeah, it starts with God. So here's the problem with like philosophy is they've started with epistemology, but not a helpful one. Okay, not an obvious one. A one where they start with doubting whether or not they can know anything in the first place, which on common sense is just stupid. Like if you ask me, how can I know anything? I don't know how to answer that because it's like I just know.
Yeah. So I mean, if you follow the rabbit trail of I might be deceived, it never ends anywhere where you actually live. Like you can't actually, nobody's actually living in that way. So it's kind of a pragmatic rebuttal. It's like whatever. If I'm gonna be skeptical about everything, then I might as well quit now.
And yeah, and the classical illustration for this is you're pulling out your eyeballs so you can see how they work.
Yeah, this is good. So I had a SEM professor who said who was meeting my skepticism with the response, well, you have to believe somebody. And I think that maybe, like the idea that you don't have to believe anybody just shows utter folly, right?
Yeah, because if you fall into that, then who are you believing? You're believing Hume and that whole philosophical thought, right? So you are believing somebody. Okay, now I think we can move on to historicity. So here's why it's important. And when we talk about historicity, like, is Genesis 1 actual history? And again, this is where it's not helpful because people will say, what do you mean by history? It's obvious what I mean. Like, did this literally happen as it's described in the Bible? Like, it's that simple, right? That's a good definition for history, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
Things that actually happened. Yeah.
Yeah, things that actually happened. And then if you ask, what does it mean that it actually happened? Okay, I don't want to talk to you anymore. So I don't have to deal with that. So there's several things here. First of all, you have 6-day creationism, right? Is that literal? And these are debates that have been happening for a couple hundred years now. So what's meant by a day? Was there a real Adam, right? Was he actually created in this way? Was there a real historical Eve who was actually taken out of Adam's side? Now, our answer is obviously yes, right? You can't be on the ordained roster of the Missouri Synod if you don't answer that question with a yes, I believe. Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. Now, here's another question, not to get us in trouble, but I know pastors on the roster of the AALC who I think we're in fellowship with who don't believe in 6-day creationism. Would you like to comment on that, David?
I don't know what you're talking about, so
Okay, well, we'll talk about it at a different time. Okay, so here's the problem. If you don't buy the historicity of Genesis 1, as in the beginning, there's God, there's nothing else. Like, he creates time, all of that. He creates the world, all of the universe in 6 days, and the rest on the seventh. One of the primary theological concerns is, what does this say about original sin? So what I mean is, if we're created through evolution rather than from God as perfect, if we subscribe to evolution, we're saying we did not start off as perfect, being created in the image of God. We could talk about what that means in a second. Rather, we started from the bottom and rose to the top. Where, if you buy the view in Genesis, we started at the top and then we fell. Okay, so you see where these viewpoints are radically different?
Yeah. So the idea that by nature, and not a fallen nature, but by origin, there's something defective with humanity. That leaves open the question of where did the defect come from? It had to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah, and so good. So if you buy that, and if you still believe buy that God made us through this means, you're saying that God is defective,
which the philosophers would completely disagree with because that's contrary to the definition of God. Can't have a God who's defective.
Yeah, or you buy some kind of Manichaean or dualistic kind of a God, right?
Right. Which is similar to the evolutionary move of just pushing things back one step. It's like, well, who made the good and the bad? Who made the good and the evil forces? Right. Somebody must have. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Now, just one more argument for you for the historicity, in particular to the literal 24-hour period of a day. If you don't buy that, like you're going to say there's 6 periods rather than 6 days, and let's say the period is what do you hear, 1,000,000 years, something like that?
Does it matter? Yeah.
I mean, okay, but so let's take it to this ridiculous conclusion. So here's what you got: day 3. So this is starting in verse 9 and verse 11. You've got the earth sprouting vegetation, plants yielding seed, fruit trees. So you've got all the vegetation right there, okay? Now, after that, you've got, let's say, a period of 1,000,000 years. Okay, what happens on day 4, David?
The lights come into existence in the sky, right?
That's right. You got the sun being created. So you tell me this. You tell me this, Mr. Scientist. You think these plants could have survived for millions of years without the sun?
Okay, so we can rule that out entirely. The idea that each day is an equal long period, right? But what if they're just in discrete periods? Step 1, this might have taken however long it took. That's how long it took Step 2 is this. This one might have taken longer, right? Step 3 might have been instantaneous.
Yeah. The problem is that then you're just pouring. We all know what a day is, right? When the Hebrew says yom, it means a 24-hour period. By the way, this is great. So do you notice before there's the sun and the moon, there is a day. So it's not that the sun and the moon determine what a day is. It's that God determines what a day is and then sets the sun and moon in order to govern that day.
This is good. Yeah, the glory of created things is that they do what God ordains them to do, according to His ordinance, right? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So if God wanted to, He could have done it however He wanted to. And so I'm addressing the million-year thing because that's what we hear more. But in history, people have said, "Well, why did it take God 6 days? That's too long." Right? Like, if God's so big, so powerful, why couldn't He be done it in a second?
Yeah. So it seems to me that maybe more common, maybe not expressed, maybe people don't articulate it this way, but like a more common objection to reading Genesis 1 historically and thinking of these as 6 24-hour days is like the sense that maybe it's not even trying to describe history. So it's describing something that is fundamentally unknowable, right? So something happened. Nobody's got any idea what it was. So you've got what is it the Egyptian myths about the gods fighting and Isis kills Osiris or the other way around or whatever it is. It's like, well, there's this thing that is fundamentally, by definition, inaccessible to us. Nobody was there. And so we need something to describe it. And, pretty handy for a priestly class to describe it in such a way that might serve their purposes, kind of boosting their elite status. So why is this distinct? Why is this different from any of those other accounts?
Oh, that's okay. So all the creation myths. So
yeah, or just mythology in general. Like I don't take. So for instance, Roald Dahl. I'm reading Roald Dahl's biography, and the guy never told a story accurately. He always embellished, always, and acknowledged it. He's like, it's like this thing happened, and it happened in this way, and he's just like, just for the sake of having a great story, I'm going to change things. In fact, what did it say? He says, I never tell lies. I just embellish the truth. That's what he goes. So why? So doesn't everybody do that, right?
Yeah. No. Okay. This is good. Okay. So have you read The Everlasting Man by Chesterton?
No, just bits and pieces. But go on.
Okay. So he's talking about the myths, and he's like, the key difference between those and Christianity is like nobody actually ever took the myths seriously. Like they all knew it was a lie. Like it was never meant to be conveyed as a historical truth. It was a fairy tale, as in like a false myth that they just happened to have around to tell good stories. But like you even see this with the Greeks. Do they actually believe in the pantheon of gods? I mean, they know it's a story that's made up, is the point. And so the difference is this, the historicity. And I always come back to this as an apologetic point. Did Jesus Christ actually come back from the dead?
Right.
And so if he does, then it proves everything that he said and wrote about, right? That makes it true. So that's the real historical fact that we're interested in. It's like we can point to that. We've got great historical evidence, all the manuscripts of the New Testament, all of that. So as far as history goes, I mean, pretty much case shut. Jesus came back from the dead. Therefore, and you know my 3 rules, David, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number 1, avoid chili before getting into the pulpit. You ever do this, by the way? What are your soup suppers like?
We not chili, not usually chili.
Oh, I broke this rule last week. I do it all the time, which is why it's so funny when I say this. And like I eat chili all the time before getting in the pulpit. But that's okay because that's rule number 1. It doesn't really matter. But rule number 2 is, and like if a guy says he's going to die and come back from the dead after being crucified, and then he actually does it, like maybe just listen to what that guy has to say about everything. That's pretty fair, right?
Yeah.
And then what's rule number 3?
Something about boomer pastors, I think, is what it was. But
that's right. Okay, but what were you going to say?
We should let that one slide. Yeah. No, this is good. This is good. just thinking about how helpful that is, especially because what's often at stake, or what's on people's minds, or maybe it's just my mind, when I get to entertaining skepticism about these things, is really kind of just laziness. It's like, you do have to do some work to engage the facts of Jesus' death and resurrection. But like Lewis says, right? You only have so many options here. It has to be one or the other. And so either it actually happened or it didn't happen. If it didn't happen, then the whole thing is hogwash. So as Paul says, right? Christ is not truly raised. We of all people are most to be pitied. And we're not acting like that. We're not acting like this is just all hogwash. So, something was compelling about the story. Something was compelling about the narrative. And if that's the case, you have to take the whole thing. You have to have the whole thing. It is, really, now that I think about it, isn't that that's the downfall of, mainline Christianity in America, is the idea that you can have something less than the whole thing. That you can have just bits and pieces that suit you.
Yeah, that's true. What do they call it? They call it buffet Christianity, right? You just kind of pick and choose what you want. But we've talked about this. It's like all of the doctrines, everything you subscribe to works together. But the reason why we could do this is we're inconsistent people, right? Like, sure. I'm not surprised when people subscribe to one doctrine but don't realize the ramifications for another. So I don't think you and I are saying that it's impossible to be a Christian if you don't buy into the historicity. What we're saying is, we feel bad for you, and we really want you to believe in that, because that's what being a full Christian would mean, right? Like, it's possible to have this weak faith, right, while acknowledging it's weak.
Well, and one of the takeaways that will come, reading through Genesis as well, is that, you could take it in a fabular way and learn something from it, okay? But if you take it as history, regarded as history, then it opens up the rest of the scriptures and in fact the rest of history. So you can read history like a book that has an author who acts in certain ways that he's instructed us in. He's told us how he behaves.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, one more thing about the historicity of particularly Genesis 1 to 11, which always gets thrown together, right? People don't doubt the historical person of Abraham, so that's Genesis 12. People just accept him. So why in particular do they doubt the first 11 chapters? And here's my theory, and I haven't done any testing on this, but my thought is this: you can't doubt Abraham because Judaism and Islam claims him. So it would be anti-Semitic and Islamic phobic to doubt the historicity of Abraham. What do you think about that?
That makes sense to me. I wouldn't have come up with that, but that makes sense. Do you know about like liberal Jews? I mean, obviously they don't believe the Bible, I guess, so they don't really care about the historicity of Abraham. So, but your point would be, it doesn't really matter. Abraham, you got to say Abraham was, right?
Right, because he's our father. Even like just ethnically, right? Whether or not they believe in God or not is irrelevant to that question.
Yeah. So I would have thought that the tone or the character of Genesis 1 through 11 is sufficiently different. So, for instance, the length of years. It's like something seems a little bit different about having these long lifespans, and then all of a sudden, people who seem more like us, right?
Yeah. There certainly is an element of what you would call like the fantastical, especially with like sure. the flood narrative. So people just want to write that off because it's ridiculous. But again, you brought up the myths. Like, what does every culture have? Some kind of flood myth, and we have an easy explanation for why that is, because you have something real that happened, and then that got spread, a la Tower of Babel, to the ends of the earth, and they're like, we know something happened with some kind of flood. How are we going to convey that now in our language? I mean, it makes perfect sense. It lines up. So rather than doubting it, now it's like, oh, we got the whole picture. Now we can kind of see where the puzzle pieces fit together.
Yeah. The integrity of those stories too is interesting. I mean, it's remarkable, the similarity. But it was occurring to me lately that there's this chronological snobbery about things that's so easy to fall into. That the idea, well, maybe this isn't exactly chronological snobbery, but it's a kind of snobbery, thinking that the world always was the way it is right now, And one of the things that characterizes the world right now, which really in the history of the world is novel, it's like just how many people there are on the globe, right? So if I was like, here's a basic fact about the world that's important, a thing that happened, the flood happened, and it happened to me, and I know it. It's like nobody else cares because there's 8 billion people on the planet. But when there are far fewer people, and like everybody's got a common ancestor that's there's living memory of, these things do get they're going to be propagated much more reliably, and also falsified much more easily. Right? Like so. I can stand up and say, and I can put on the internet any number of things, and it's like you can't actually know. You won't be able to know because you don't know me, right? But if you knew Abraham, if you knew Noah,
Sure. Yeah. No, that's good. Okay. You wanna talk to me about the structure of Genesis 1?
Yeah. I think it's striking and helpful. Helpful for memory's sake, primarily, to see how the first 3 days consist of division, and then the latter 3 days consist of population. So I did this once with the kids with some construction paper. So you start with dividing the light from the darkness, and now you've got light and dark, right? And then what do? You put an expanse, so you've got division between waters below and waters above, right? And so there's division again, and then you've got the division of the waters below, so that you have dry land in between them. Divide, divide, divide. You take the material and you divide it, which, when you think about it, is essential to the propagation of life, just generally. The division of cells. Also, when you think about how even like how ideas work, you break things down into parts and then you reassemble them. This is how you contemplate things. You break them down and you reassemble. This is how you prepare rhetorically. You take a bunch of information and you dissect it and then you rearrange it. Right? So this is what God's doing in those first 3 days, and then He's populating them. Right. So the higher story of creation with the lights, the middle story and the waters. So you get swarming and flying things. Right. And then you've got the land, where there are roaming creatures, beasts, and creeping things and livestock.
David, do you see in this, because this is how God does it, and then you brought up, like, this is how humans do it too. So do you think this is part of the image of God?
So, I guess I don't know. We do it actively, right, with our mental faculties. So to the extent that our mental faculties are a component of the image of God, I guess that makes sense. But I think it feels much more like it's woven into the fabric of created things. When you make something, you necessarily make it after your own likeness. There's a peculiar way that is true of humanity, right? And I would say that this thing is not peculiar to humanity. It's just it is in the character of God, and so it's in the character of creation.
Sure. Okay. Cool. All right. Go on. You are on a good train of thought.
No, well, so then that's really its utility is primarily for me like remembering how these days are ordered. But then you can also see, like once you've got that paradigm, divide and populate or divide and reorganize. You can start to see these things play out in the ritual of the life of God's people. So what's going on with sacrifice? You get a division between flesh and blood. The blood is poured out. And then I've never really been able to articulate very clearly exactly how the parallels here, but it's like it's reassembled, it's reorganized in a way, even to a greater degree when you put it on an altar and it's burned up, right? It's like you get this reconstitution. And so something new is happening out of the original thing. You get this in marriage, right? Man and woman in the sixth day. So you take a rib out of Adam, you divide, and then you reassemble, and now you've got two who together are going to continue the process of dividing and reassembling, right? And then the dispersion, go and be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. How's that going to happen? this population requires, first division and then population. So anyways, it's just, I mean, it sets the tone for everything that follows. And if you pay attention to how God describes the kinds of things that he commands his people to do, both in their ceremonial life together, so the worship in the sanctuary, as well as like ethically and morally, I think that you could see how this plays out, right? So when you love your neighbor, when you serve your neighbor, when you feed the poor, you're making a sacrifice. You're separating a portion from yourself, and you're reconstituting things. Yeah.
No, it's good. Okay, so what the vision here? So you got the structure of the 3 and 3, but you also have a progression, right? Because it goes from good to very good at the end. And this is the Christian vision, right, for how history works. I mean, okay, we all know that you're a post-millennial. That's a joke, but like that's their vision. But overall, the problem with that, and we could talk about that, is the timescape of it. We wouldn't disagree, though, in eternity, this is how things work. It starts at good, and then it just keeps getting better, right? God's glory just keeps increasing and increasing and increasing, and then ends in Sabbath rest. That's a pretty powerful vision for how the world works.
Right. Yeah. Just thinking about how, if you're honest, it resonates too. It's resonant, and but we live in kind of denial about it. So we have to talk explicitly about how you need a Sabbath day. You need a day of rest. And I was framing this in terms of it's similar to the tithe. So God promises to give you enough, so that even after you've given away 10%, you have plenty. Right? He's promised to give you enough time, so that even after you devote a seventh of it to the scriptures and hearing the preaching of God's word, you still have enough. You still have enough time, right? As it is, kind of the cult of productivity, or being enamored with success, or whatever it might be. The idea that you don't actually need rest, or that rest is you can sleep when you're dead, kind of a thing. It's in denial of the fact that this is actually what we were made for. Was this ever increasing this growth, which is involved in cycles of labor and rest, but always more and more, always more productive. That really resonates, especially if you think about all the people in the world who are bound up in futility, who do things that don't ever get anywhere. It's like so much labor in the world is spinning wheels. It's like if our enemies were ever to take down our information infrastructure, a lot of people would be out of a job, and everything that they had done would be completely obliterated. And here God gives a promise. I mean, this is the lament of Solomon in Ecclesiastes, right? It's like we're not getting anywhere. We're not getting anywhere. Well, God wants you to get somewhere, and that was the design.
So this is the old adage, right? Before you chop down a tree, you sharpen the axe,
right?
Kind of thing. Precisely the point, right? So that's great. So the role of the Sabbath day, it's like part of it is just to think about what you're supposed to do before you do it. Because who's more productive, the guy who never sleeps, or the guy who gets 8 hours of sleep every day? Like he dedicates a third of his day to sleep. But who's more productive?
Right. Yeah. And built into that also is this the presupposition that it's all a gift from God, right? So if you are the receiver, the recipient of God's blessings, so that you can put them to good use, like the guy who buries his one talent thinks that he has conserved something for himself, but in the end he's completely missed out on what would have been given to him, right? Not just an increase, a natural increase, an additional talent if he'd put it to work, but also you get to be lord over 2 cities, right?
Right. Oh, I love that, because this connects it back to Genesis 1, because this is all done out of the glory of God, right? So my take on that parable of the talent is connecting it with Matthew 18. Remember the guy owes 10,000 talents to the king, right, and he's forgiven. And obviously that's a picture of God and us. We owe him an insurmountable amount of things that we could never give back to him. And the thing is, what we've robbed from God by sinning was his glory, right? So that's what we owe back to God, because we desecrated his creation, right? We could never repay it. So then Jesus has to come and repay it. That's why the cross is the glory of Christ paid on our behalf. So you take that interpretation. So are you buying that the talent would be the glory of God? And we can't even pay back one, let alone 10,000. So now what happens is this guy's got one talent, but he's still got a little bit of the glory of God, right? Like it's still, obviously we've distorted the image, we're sinful, and yet it's still there a little bit, right? Because we still have it, God is still there. He might not have as much as the other guy, but he still has the very glory of God to work with. And the problem is he's just lazy. He doesn't want to do anything with it. Like that's the chief sin. Because what does God say? Be fruitful and multiply. And that guy just detests the commandments of God. And he's got all the stuff he needs to work with.
Yeah. I mean, so laziness probably, this is good. I mean, what is at the root of laziness? So, is it ever really just that I don't want to work? Or is there, I mean, there's more fundamentally unbelief at the root of it. It's like you said, be fruitful and multiply, but I will get less enjoyment out of working than I will out of just sitting here. When in fact, the promise is you will get more enjoyment out of working than just sitting here.
Right, yeah, so that's right. The root cause is, you could say unbelief, or you could say like hating what God has set up.
Sure, yeah. So I actually don't want more of what you're giving to me. So
Right. Which is nihilism. And this is where C.S. Lewis is so helpful. He's like, nobody's gonna be in heaven who doesn't want to be there. Because that wouldn't be heaven, right? Because they would detest the very things of God. And guess what we're doing in heaven? Worshiping Jesus. They're gonna hate it.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
All right. Well, you have any more to say about Genesis 1, or you want to tell me about what you're reading, what you're consuming?
You know, I had written down problems with evolution, which I think is just worth touching on too. This.
Sure.
It's always presented in such plausible terms. You know, it's like posit that you have an unlimited amount of time, and then basically anything's possible, right? And it's always so striking to me that the statistical laws that seem to be like so important to most kinds of research are completely ignored when it comes to extrapolating backwards in history. It's like I've got this data set of a couple thousand years maybe, and then the extrapolation goes back. How old do they say the universe is? It's like that data set amounts to a single point, and you can't extrapolate a line from a single point. And there are lots of different kinds of curves. Not all of them are linear. So it's just like it's silly.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the next part of the podcast where we say that we don't think the dinosaurs really existed. Because
Have you been to the Ark Institute in Kentucky? Kentucky, is it Kentucky?
I haven't. Do they have the dinosaurs in the Ark?
They have some dinosaurs in the Ark, small ones that fit on the Ark. Yeah.
Yeah, we could. I need to think more deeply about that. But I mean, part of me just wants to say it's preposterous. You take one bone and you build an entire animal out of it, which, by the way, seems more likely to me than the whole evolutionary kind of a prospect, what you're talking about, the statistics. I mean, what did they say? It'd be more likely for monkeys to sit down and type Shakespeare on a typewriter than for the universe to just evolve how it did.
Right. Yeah. But it makes for a good story, which is, I don't know any paleontologists, but I've always thought that paleontology is really just storytelling. But you are operating with the same thesis about it that I have, which is that you take that it seems to generally be the case that there's one bone, and then this model is created, and I'm under the impression, I think I got this impression from whatever museums of natural history that I've been to, where you're reading the fine print, and it's like, this isn't that, these aren't the actual bones. Maybe there are a couple of them. I have a hard time though believing that reasonable people smart people would leap in such a way. So is it actually the case? Do you know? Is it actually the case that we don't have full skeletons of prehistoric reptiles?
Okay, well, I think we have to address that term prehistoric first.
Yeah, what would be considered as prehistoric reptiles? Okay, all right.
Well, I mean, if it's prehistory, it didn't really happen, right?
Okay, fine. All right, whatever. Things from long ago.
Well, so this is the question. Like, is it pre-flood? Is that, I mean, to put the biblical timeline on it?
Yeah, that would be
But
admissible, right?
yeah, I need to think this through, because if two of every kind of animal actually did get on the ark, right, then they presumably would have gotten off the ark and be able to, procreate that way. So
Yeah, I mean, God can do what he wants, right? He could have been like, not you guys.
to a certain extent, that's another conversation. It's like God can't do certain stuff, right? Like he can't lie, which is
Well, that's why
comforting.
I mean it in the technical sense. He can do what he wants.
Oh, that's true. What's your answer when the kids ask you, "Hey, Pastor, if God's omnipotent, can he create a stone so big that he can't pick it up?"
The answer is no, he can't. So,
Okay,
yeah.
that's all you say.
But more importantly, he wouldn't. How's that?
That's fair.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. Well, I want to find out more about what actual bones there are. I watched a documentary recently about bones in Alaska. This guy bought a piece of property to do gold mining, and was and like happened upon this large, enormous collection of mammoth bones, whatever the North American equivalent of saber-toothed tigers is. It's like all these bones and complete skeletons, right? And that's fascinating. I mean, it's really interesting. And why would they all be in one spot? That's really interesting. And so there, like, you have paleontologists assembling entire skeletons for these creatures, and that seems to be pretty clear. Like, it's like, yep, there they are. That undeniable. Those pieces fit together in this way, right? And then to go the next step and say, but there are some that we've just made up. It's like, that's an amazing thing, right? Anyways, I don't know enough about it. I got to know more. So.
Yeah, hey, if you're a paleontologist and you're listening to this, we'd love to have you on and interview you in good faith. In good faith.
Yeah, I want to know how many bones you actually have. That's what I want to know.
The answer is 206. Okay, why don't you tell me, give me a quick 2-minute pitch about this Roland Bainton book you just read about Erasmus, and why you think Erasmus is full of it.
Yeah, so I needed to get a glimpse at Erasmus from somebody other than the Calvinists and the Lutherans, because we hate him so much, and it was like, can't be all bad. That guy can't be all bad. So Bainton wrote his Luther biography. What is it? Here I Stand, and I haven't read that in a long time, and I can't remember the tone of it, but it's widely regarded as like the definitive biography, I think, or has been at least. So Bainton wrote Erasmus of Christendom, and as you pointed out when I showed you the book cover, I think I showed you the book cover, it's like, that's telling, isn't it? Erasmus of Christendom, a man for Christendom, a man who is representative of all of Christendom. So Bainton starts with a very sympathetic description of Erasmus. Basically, he says, I like the way he thinks. I like the fact that he doesn't like being definitive, that he leaves things open, that he wants to be conciliatory. Bainton basically says that's his personality too. And this is what made it a great read, is because Bainton is very sympathetic. At the same time, what I ended up loving about it, I didn't like it at first because I was like, I really don't like Erasmus. He drives me nuts. And I see his theology and his personality in contemporary Christianity all over the place, and it makes me frustrated. So at first I didn't like it at all, but then Bainton really does make clear that Erasmus, like in the conflict with Luther over the bondage of the will, Erasmus lost. Fair and square, he lost, and it was a kind of like a political blunder and a theological blunder, and that's all there is to it. He does at the end of the book hypothesize that maybe you need to have an Erasmus and a Luther for things to work. And I don't know enough about this, but I wonder whether it would be better to say, or whether you could say, you need a Luther and a Melanchthon, and you don't ever need an Erasmus.
I was gonna ask you that question. So when you started talking about like Erasmus is okay with like open questions, right? Doesn't ever want to be definitive about that. I mean, did you think about like maybe that was really influential on Melanchthon? Because they're both humanists, right? That's what the tag we've put on Erasmus and Melanchthon. Melanchthon seems to have this open question kind of nature about him. He's like, he wants to get along with everybody. The Pope one day, the Calvinist the next.
Right. Yeah. From what I've heard, Melanchthon was displeased with the treatment that Erasmus got from Luther. Just like it hurt him personally because Erasmus was a hero. He was everybody's hero. And wouldn't it be great? I mean, wouldn't we all love it if you could have true reform in the church without anybody getting hurt? Like you only hurt the people who everybody agrees they're awful. Right, like the monk who is getting fat in his monastery and who's got concubines all over the place. We all hate that guy. Wouldn't it be great if you could reform Christianity just by hating on that guy? Right. So there's this appeal.
What does his weight have to do with anything?
It has everything to do with it, right? As a matter of fact, because that's what Erasmus said about Luther. What did he say? He said Luther struck the. Oh shoot! I can't remember the quotation, but it had something to do with hitting the monks in their bellies. So.
Oh, okay. So we've been making fun of fat people for hundreds of years. Is what you're saying? Okay. Oh yeah. Let me tell you about this book I'm finishing up. I've got two. I'll tell you about the other one later. But it's this first American rendering of Gabriel Marcel's philosophy. So Gabriel Marcel is a French kind of existentialist philosopher who's Catholic, and I will say it's the best version of existentialist theology or philosophy I've ever read. Like, I'm giving it a fair read, and I think he's got a lot of good things to say. So what's really good about this book, it's by a guy named Kenneth Gallagher, is that Marcel himself actually wrote the introduction to the work, like a foreword. And he said, yep, everything in here is true, what I would have to say. So as a secondary resource, very valuable, and then I don't have to waste my time with the primary stuff unless I want to. Marcel was also a playwright, wrote lots of plays. But one really helpful thing that I'm getting from this book is Marcel makes a distinction between mysteries and problems. And this is very fruitful. So the thing is, with problems, you can solve a problem, and a problem is outside of you. So it's an objective thing. It's like a math problem. You can figure that out. The thing with mysteries is you can't ever solve it. You live with it. So when we talk about like God or philosophy, we're never going to be able to be objective about these things. Marcel's big thing was being. So what does it mean to be? We can't ever fix that as a problem because we're never going to be objective about it because we ourselves are beings, right? So rather, this is a mystery we have to live with. And I think this would be so helpful just practically in our everyday lives. Things you live with. Some things are problems that you can fix. Okay, copier's broken. I can go fix that. Whatever. Mysteries, though, this is life together. This is life as the church. Like, I don't have to fix everything. So I'm not talking about repentance and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I'm just talking about like personality stuff. Like, David, there are things I don't like about you, but I'm not going to fix it. It's a great divine mystery that I'm just going to live with, and I'm going to learn to appreciate it over time.
Yeah, this is good. I think that this is helpful because recognizing that the existence of mysteries doesn't undermine the whole enterprise. It's just like it is. It is what it is in some sense, and you have to live with it. Because I'm thinking about theological mysteries that you encounter and where you have to acknowledge them as mystery, and then you have to move on. Like, for instance, the Crux Theologorum, right? It's like it's hidden. It's hidden in God's secret wisdom, and it's a mystery. It doesn't mean that it's not true that God chooses some. It's still true. Right. You just don't understand how, and that's all there is to it. Yeah.
What's your position on intuite fide?
No, not good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
So explain to me though. Back to Marcel here though. Explain to me existentialism. Give me existentialism in a nutshell.
Well, okay, that's hard to do because it's John Paul Sartre who coins the term existentialism, and he has a very specific thing in mind, and we should viscerally react to anything that Sartre ever did. First of all, because he was a disgusting human being. I mean, just a notorious womanizer. And so you always have to take a philosopher's actual biography in mind when you're reading his philosophy. Does he actually mean it? Like, he's talking about these higher morals. and the guy's like a serial adulterer. Like, you don't believe it, right? This is the same thing with preachers. Like, they're telling you to live ethical lives. This is why, like, the life of the preacher actually does matter. So back to Marcel, great guy. This is the difference. And he's in that Peter Kreeft writes about him in the 100 Greatest Philosophers, which what got me onto him. Authentic guy, loved his wife his whole life. So here's my definition of existentialism, and this goes back to Kierkegaard. It is a separation of the rational world, so the downstairs would be the way of looking at it, from the upstairs, as in the faith. So what it is a separation from like real world stuff from faith. So in Kierkegaard's term, you have to take a leap of faith from the rational, from down here, into the upstairs. And it doesn't matter what you believe, just so as long as you believe it. You've made that leap of faith. That's the only way to be happy, because downstairs is depressing. Upstairs is good. Now, I think Kierkegaard was a Christian, but I think his philosophy was disastrous. And we could talk about the history of philosophy another time, why he came to that conclusion. But that's the existentialism. You're living up here rather than down here. And I see this all the time in culture. This is why drugs are so popular. It's an escape from reality. So the Christian answer, though, is not to make a leap of faith, but it's rather that the reality is actually good, right? Where did Jesus come? Into our real time to save us from our sins, actually came back from the dead. We believe in that because it's rational, not because it helps us escape from something.
Yeah, actually more rational than what's taken as rational.
Right. Now, did I answer the question? What is existentialism?
I think that the picture of the gap between down here and up there, that's helpful. Okay, yeah. And Marcel, you said, is a Christian philosopher. He's
Catholic. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. What really grinds your gears there, Josh?
Well, that was it. That was Marcel. We've talked about this. If you got something really pressing to tell the pastor, right before divine service is not a good time to do it. So.
I hope you're listening.
Do you have one that grinds your gears?
Daylight savings time. Really, I know that this is a hot political issue right now, but why isn't it easier just to adjust the time of events than to adjust the time of the day? I don't understand that. So
I used to be right with you, but I'm a child of the light. I love it.
Yeah,
it's great.
Well, I do love the light as well, but I like the light in the morning, and I lost it yesterday. I lost it. It's gone. So
it'll come back.
You're right. So this is a beautiful thing. This doesn't grind my gear. Praise God for this. This time of the year, heading into what would it be, the vernal equinox, we are gaining daylight at a rate of about 3 minutes a day, which is just, glorious. It's like, what could be better for Lent, the lengthening of days, than to be gaining that much light right now? So awesome.
That is great. I love, so Lent, Old English word for spring, right? It's perfect. Things die, and then they come back from the dead.
Okay, so that this is for another time, but Jesus talks about a grain of wheat falling into the earth and dying and bearing much fruit. And I have thought, it's like we should really acknowledge that what providence it is, that God in creation built in these analogies that like are of the resurrection. He builds an analogy of the resurrection into the natural world. What an incredible thing.
I mean, it's almost like he has got foreknowledge, but
Yes.
that's great, David. Hey, this was fun. We should do it again sometime.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. I'm gonna hit the stop button here.
Okay.